The Omega will be your downfall. That's what the seer told Alpha King Teodoro Wagner 3 months before his pack was slaughtered. He'd laughed. Then what threat could the weakest designation possibly pose to the most powerful wolf in North America? But when he woke in a frozen cabin with 15 of his wolves alive against impossible odds, with an Omega's warmth still pressed against his skin, and her scent filling his lungs like salvation, he finally understood. The prophecy hadn't been a warning about his destruction. It had been a promise about his resurrection. Because Shelia Stanton wasn't his downfall. She was his revolution. And neither of them had any idea that saving his life in that blizzard would ignite a war that would reshape every pack in the Northern Territories. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how a king fell for the wolf everyone said was worthless, you need to know what happened the night the storm came. The night everything changed. If you're already hooked and want to see how this impossible love story unfolds, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more people discover stories like Shelia's. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Omega Stain. The first rule of being an Omega in the Nightshade Pack was simple: don't exist too loudly. Shelia had learned that lesson at 5 years old when her mother, Gail Fisher, slapped her across the face for laughing during the Alpha's ceremony. Omegas don't draw attention, her mother had hissed, her eyes cold as January frost. We survive by being useful and invisible. Your sister understands this. Why can't you? Her sister. Of course. Joni Rose, technically her half-sister. But the pack never bothered with technicalities when one sister was an Alpha-born and the other was, well, whatever Shelia was. Joni stood now at the front of the pack meeting hall, her golden hair catching the firelight like a crown, her Alpha aura radiating confidence and power. At 23, she was already being considered for beta positions in neighboring packs. Marriage offers came monthly from Alphas who wanted to strengthen their bloodlines. Shelia, at 21, had received exactly 0 offers, 0 invitations, 0 acknowledgements that she even existed beyond her designation as Gail's Omega daughter, the disappointing one. The winter stores are running low, announced Elder Philip Underwood, his gray beard bristling with importance. We'll need hunting parties to venture into the Northern Territories before the next storm hits. I'll lead the primary team. Joni volunteered immediately, her voice clear and commanding. Several young Alphas and Betas nodded enthusiastically, already positioning themselves to join her group. Shelia remained in her corner near the back, her presence so diminished that most wolves forgot she was there. That was intentional. Invisibility was survival. Shelia will handle the preparations, Gail announced suddenly, not even looking at her daughter. Food packs, medical supplies, emergency gear. Have everything ready by dawn. Of course. The Omega gets the servant work while the Alpha gets the glory. Yes, mother, Shelia murmured, keeping her eyes down. The submissive posture was automatic now, worn into her bones like water wearing down stone. Speak up, Elder Underwood snapped. Omegas who mumble are worse than useless. Yes, Elder. I'll have everything prepared. Louder this time, but not too loud. Never too loud. Joni glanced back at her, and for just a moment, something flickered across her perfect features. Pity? Contempt? Shelia couldn't tell anymore. They'd stopped being real sisters years ago, around the time Joni's Alpha designation manifested and Shelia's Omega status became undeniable. The meeting continued with discussions of territory boundaries, pack politics, and the rumors of rogue activity in the mountains. Shelia listened with half an ear, already mentally cataloging what supplies she'd need to gather. Medical supplies would be crucial. The Northern Territories were treacherous even in good weather, and a storm was forecasted. Actually, according to the weather reports she'd secretly been monitoring on the old radio in the storage shed, a massive storm system was building. Not just any storm. A blizzard that could drop 3 feet of snow in 6 hours. The kind of storm that killed wolves who were caught unprepared. Should she mention it? Warn them? She opened her mouth, then caught her mother's warning glare from across the room. Right. Omegas don't speak unless spoken to. Omegas don't question the Alpha's decisions. Omegas certainly don't pretend to know more than their betters about weather patterns and survival strategies, even if they've spent years studying meteorology in secret because they had nothing else to do during their endless isolation. The meeting ended with the usual dismissals. Alphas and Betas filed out in clusters, already making plans for the hunt. their voices full of excitement and confidence. Shelia waited until everyone else had left before standing, her joints stiff from sitting motionless for 2 hours on the cold stone floor. "Shelia." Her mother's voice stopped her at the door. She turned. "Yes, Mother." Gail approached, her expression carefully neutral. She was a beta, not quite alpha material but respectable enough. Her mating to an alpha had produced Joni her pride and joy. Her previous mating to Shelia's father, an omega who died when Shelia was 3, had produced, well, Shelia. "Don't embarrass me tomorrow," Gail said quietly. "Elder Underwood is already questioning why I allow you to remain in the main pack house instead of the omega quarters." Translation: one more mistake and Shelia would be exiled to the servant housing on the Pax Banyan, where the lowest-ranked wolves lived in shame and poverty. "I won't embarrass you," Shelia promised, her chest tight with familiar hurt. When had her mother started looking at her with such disappointment? When had love turned into cold tolerance? "See that you don't." "And Shelia?" Gail's voice dropped even lower. "Stop spending so much time with those books and radios. It's unseemly for an omega to pretend at knowledge. It makes you seem above your station." Above her station, as if wanting to understand the world around her was a crime, as if teaching herself meteorology and wilderness survival and pack history was somehow worse than accepting her role as invisible servant. "Yes, Mother." Gail left without another word, her footsteps echoing away into silence. Shelia stood alone in the meeting hall, surrounded by the fading warmth of bodies and the lingering scent of pack, a scent that had never quite felt like it included her. She made her way to the storage building, a small structure on the eastern edge of Packlands. This was her domain, the one place where her organizational skills were valued, even if she wasn't. Rows of supplies lined the walls. Dried meat, medical kits, emergency blankets, rope, flares. She worked through the night, preparing packs for 15 wolves. Joni's hunting party would be 12 strong, plus 3 reserves. Each pack needed to be perfect enough supplies to last 3 days, emergency gear in case of injury, and extra rations in case they had to shelter in place. As she worked, her eyes kept drifting to the old radio on the shelf. She'd salvaged it from the trash heap 2 years ago, and taught herself to repair it using manuals from the pack's neglected library. Now she listened to weather reports, news broadcasts, anything that connected her to the world beyond pack boundaries. She turned it on, keeping the volume low. Severe weather advisory for the northern mountain region. Blizzard conditions expected to develop rapidly after midnight. Winds up to 60 miles per hour, visibility near zero, temperatures dropping to -15 degrees. Residents are advised to shelter in place and avoid all unnecessary travel. Shelia's blood went cold. After midnight. That was in 4 hours. Joni's hunting party was leaving at dawn, which would put them directly in the path of the storm by mid-morning. She had to warn them, but would they listen to an omega? Would they believe her over their own alpha instincts and Elder Underwood's confident predictions of clear weather for 3 days? Shelia stared at the 15 packs she'd so carefully prepared, each one potentially a survival kit for wolves caught in a deadly storm. And she made a decision that would change everything. She was going to follow them. Not close enough to be detected, her omega scent was easy to suppress, and she'd learned to move quietly through years of trying not to be noticed. But close enough to help if the storm hit and they needed someone who actually understood how to survive a blizzard. It was stupid. Dangerous. Completely against pack law for an omega to leave pack lands without permission. But something deep in her gut, some instinct she'd learned to trust during long, lonely nights, studying survival, told her that tomorrow, 15 wolves were going to need saving. And she was the only one who could do it. Shelia finished preparing the packs, then set about preparing a 16th for herself. Extra blankets, fire-starting supplies, emergency food, her medical kit, rope, flares. Everything she'd need to rescue a bunch of alphas who were too proud to check a weather report. As dawn approached and she heard the hunting party beginning to gather, Shelia slipped out into the pre-storm darkness, invisible as always. But this time, her invisibility was going to save lives, even if none of them would ever thank her for it. Chapter 2. The Storm's Teeth. The first snowflakes began falling as Shelia crossed into the northern territories, each one fat and heavy with the promise of violence. She'd maintained a quarter-mile distance behind the hunting party, using every trick she'd learned about scent suppression and silent movement. Omegas were supposed to be weak, but weakness taught you how to be invisible. Invisibility taught you how to survive. The hunting party moved with the careless confidence of alphas who'd never truly faced consequences. Sheila could hear Joni's voice carrying back on the wind, full of laughter and commands. They were tracking an elk herd, following prints that led deeper into the mountain passes, deeper into the kill zone. Sheila checked her compass for the third time in 10 minutes. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the last hour. The wind was picking up, carrying that peculiar electric scent that came before major storms. Every instinct she'd honed through years of study was screaming danger. She should turn back. Let them figure it out themselves. Let the alphas use their superior strength and instincts to save themselves like they always bragged they could. But she kept walking. By noon, the snow was falling so thick she could barely see 10 feet ahead. The wind had transformed from breeze to battering ram, shoving against her body with physical force. Sheila had wrapped her scarf around her face, but ice was already forming on the fabric from her breath. The hunting party had stopped moving. She could hear raised voices ahead, arguing over direction. Good. At least they'd finally noticed they were in trouble. Sheila circled around to a ridge overlooking their position. Through the whiteout conditions, she could make out 15 figures huddled in a natural depression between two rock faces. They'd tried to start a fire, but the wind kept killing it. Several wolves were already shivering violently, first-stage hypothermia. They were going to die out here. The realization hit her like a physical blow. 15 wolves, including her sister, were going to freeze to death because they'd been too proud to listen to an Omega's weather warning that she'd never been brave enough to give. Sheila closed her eyes, running through everything she knew about cold weather survival. They needed shelter, immediate shelter, not the inadequate depression they'd found. They needed fire that could withstand the wind. They needed body heat consolidation. They needed someone who knew what the hell they were doing. She could leave them, go back to the pack, report their location, and let the elders organize a rescue party, but that would take hours these wolves didn't have. The storm was only getting worse, and night was coming. Or she could reveal herself, face their anger and mockery and contempt. Admit she'd followed them, violated pack law, stepped above her station in the most flagrant way possible, and maybe, possibly, save their lives. Damn it, Sheila whispered into the howling wind. She made her way down the ridge, fighting through snow that was already knee-deep. By the time she reached the hunting party's location, she was coated in ice and breathing hard. "Help," she called out, her voice barely carrying over the wind. "I know shelter, follow me." Joni's head snapped up, her alpha eyes widening in shock. "Sheila? What the hell are you doing here? Freezing to death, same as you?" Sheila shot back, too cold and too scared to remember proper Omega deference. "There's a cave system half a mile west. I can get us there, but we need to move now." "You followed us?" One of the male alphas, Guy Bolton, stepped forward, his face twisted with rage despite his violent shivering. "You disobeyed direct pack orders. You will be alive to face punishment if you follow me right now," Sheila interrupted. "Or you can stay here and die arguing about Omega Protocol. Your choice." She turned and started walking west, not waiting to see if they'd follow. Either they would or they wouldn't. Either way, she'd tried. For a long moment, nothing. Then she heard footsteps crunching through snow behind her. "Everyone stay close," Joni commanded, her alpha voice cutting through the storm. "Tom, help Mohammed, he can barely walk. Move." They followed her. 15 alphas and betas, following an Omega through a blizzard because pride mattered less than survival. The half-mile took 45 minutes of brutal, exhausting march through whiteout conditions. Sheila navigated by compass and memory. She'd explored these territories during her lonely wanderings, mapping caves and shelter points because that's what you did when you had no friends and too much time. By the time they reached the cave entrance, 2 wolves had collapsed and were being carried. Several others were barely conscious. Sheila's own body was shutting down, her fingers numb inside her gloves, her face burning with cold. But they'd made it. The cave was exactly where she remembered, a wide entrance that narrowed into a deep chamber, protected from the wind, with a natural chimney that would vent smoke. She'd stashed emergency supplies here months ago, during one of her exploration trips: firewood, blankets, medical supplies. Get them inside, Shelia ordered, too cold to remember she had no authority to order anyone. Strip off wet clothes. Skin-to-skin contact for the hypothermia cases. I need the driest wood we have for fire. To her shock, they obeyed. Maybe it was because they were too cold to argue. Maybe it was because Joni backed up her commands. Or maybe, just maybe, they were starting to realize that the Omega knew what she was doing. Shelia got the fire started using the techniques she'd practiced 100 times alone in the woods. The flames caught, held, grew. Heat began to fill the cave. Wolves started to thaw. She moved through the group, checking for frostbite, distributing her emergency rations, wrapping the most severe cases in the blankets she'd stashed. Her hands moved with competent efficiency, all the skills she'd learned from books and lonely practice finally being put to use. "You saved our lives," Joni said quietly, appearing at her elbow. Her perfect sister looked terrible, hair, matted with ice, lips blue, skin pale, but alive. "I don't understand. Why did you follow us?" "Because I checked the weather reports," Shelia said simply, tucking a blanket around Daniel Carroll, whose lips were finally returning to normal color. "Because I knew this storm was coming. Because someone had to. But you're—" Joni trailed off. "An Omega?" Shelia finished. "Yeah. Turns out being underestimated means you have a lot of time to learn useful things. Like how not to die in a blizzard." Joni looked at her sister. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for how we've treated you. How I've treated you." Before Shelia could respond, one of the wolves near the back of the cave made a choking sound. "There's more. Coming in from the entrance." Shelia spun around. Through the cave entrance, barely visible through the snow, she saw shapes moving. Large shapes, more wolves, but these weren't from their pack. The first wolf that staggered into the cave was massive, easily 7 feet tall in his human form, with dark hair and eyes that glowed amber even in his exhaustion. He was carrying another wolf over his shoulder, and 3 more were stumbling in behind him. They all had the same thing in common. They were barely conscious, hypothermic, and dying. "Please," the massive wolf gasped, his voice rough with cold and desperation. "Please help them. They're all I have left." Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed. Guy Bolton leaped up, shifting partially into his wolf form, teeth bared. "Rogues, they're rogue wolves. They're dying wolves," Shelia snapped, already moving toward the collapsed strangers. "And we're not letting anyone die tonight. Help me get them to the fire." She didn't know who these wolves were. Didn't know what pack they belonged to or what they were doing in Nightshade territory during a blizzard. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She hadn't saved 15 wolves just to let 5 more die from stupidity and prejudice, even if it meant protecting rogues, the most dangerous, unpredictable wolves in existence. Even if the massive wolf she was currently trying to drag toward the fire was radiating a power that made her Omega instincts scream to submit and flee. Even if, when she looked at his unconscious face, something deep in her chest twisted with a recognition she didn't understand and couldn't explain. The storm howled outside, but inside the cave, Shelia worked to save 20 lives instead of 15, and she had absolutely no idea that the unconscious wolf she was trying so desperately to save was Theodora Wagner, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, or that when he woke up, everything she knew about her pathetic little Omega life was about to shatter completely. Chapter 3. The Stranger in Her Arms. The massive wolf's skin was like ice beneath Shelia's trembling fingers. She'd stripped him down to his underwear, proper protocol for severe hypothermia, though her face burned with embarrassment despite the life-or-death situation. His 4 companions were in similar states, all of them hovering in that dangerous zone between alive and gone. "Shelia, you can't be serious," Guy Bolton hissed, grabbing her arm. "These are rogues. They could kill us all when they wake up." She yanked her arm free, her patience finally snapping. "Then they can kill us warm instead of frozen. Now either help me or get out of my way." Guy's eyes flashed with alpha dominance, that instinctive need to put an Omega in her place. But Joni stepped between them, her own alpha aura flaring. "She's right," Joni said firmly. "We don't leave wolves to die. Any wolves. That's not who we are." The tension held for a heartbeat. Then Guy backed down with a frustrated growl. But he kept his distance. watching the unconscious strangers with suspicious eyes. Shelia worked quickly, using every technique she'd learned. She positioned the 5 newcomers closest to the fire, packed them with the warmest blankets, and began the slow process of rewarming. Too fast and their hearts could stop. Too slow and hypothermia would finish what the storm had started. The massive wolf, their leader, clearly was in the worst shape. His lips were blue-gray, his breathing shallow, his heartbeat dangerously slow. Shelia pressed her ear to his chest, counting the beats. 40 per minute. Critically low. "I need body heat," she announced. "Someone get skin to skin with him now." Silence. The nightshade wolves all looked at each other, but no one moved. Getting that close to a rogue wolf, especially one this powerful, went against every survival instinct. "Fine," Shelia muttered. "I'll do it myself." "Shelia, no," Joni protested. "If he wakes up and his wolf is in survival mode, he could kill you instantly. Omegas are the first target when an alpha feels threatened. Then I guess I'd better make sure he doesn't feel threatened." Shelia was already stripping off her outer layers, down to her thermal shirt and leggings. Her hands shook from cold, from fear, from the absolute insanity of what she was about to do. She climbed under the blankets with the stranger, pressing her body against his ice-cold skin. The size difference was shocking. He was easily twice her mass. All muscle and power, even in his unconscious state. This close, she could smell him pine and winter wind and something wild that made her Omega instincts go haywire with conflicting signals. Danger. Safety. Threat. Protection. Run. Stay. His heartbeat was against her chest now, that terrifyingly slow rhythm. She wrapped her arms around him, sharing her warmth, willing his body to fight. "Come on," she whispered. "You didn't survive a blizzard just to die in a cave. Come on." Minutes passed, then an hour. Shelia monitored his vital signs obsessively: pulse, breathing, skin temperature. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, his heartbeat began to strengthen. 50 beats per minute, 55, 60. His skin started to warm. Color returned to his lips. He was going to live. Relief crashed through her so intensely that tears stung her eyes. Around the cave, the other 4 strangers were also stabilizing, thanks to the nightshade wolves who'd finally, reluctantly, helped with rewarming efforts. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault. Snow had drifted halfway up the cave entrance. They were trapped here until the storm passed, which, according to Shelia's calculations, wouldn't be until sometime tomorrow afternoon at the earliest. 20 wolves in one cave, 15 from her pack, 5 rogues, and her, the Omega, who'd somehow ended up responsible for all of them. "You should rest," Joni said softly, appearing beside her with a cup of hot water from their melted snow supply. "You've been taking care of everyone for hours. Let someone else monitor him." "I'm fine," Shelia lied, but she accepted the water gratefully. The warmth felt like heaven against her throat. "You're extraordinary," Joni corrected. "I never knew you were capable of all this. The survival skills, the medical knowledge, the leadership." She paused. "I'm ashamed of how blind I've been." Shelia didn't know what to say to that. Years of hurt didn't evaporate because of one apology, one moment of recognition. But it was something. A crack in the wall between them. "Get some sleep, Joni. I'll wake you if anything changes." Her sister hesitated, then nodded and moved back to her own sleeping area. One by one, the other nightshade wolves settled down for the night, exhaustion finally overwhelming fear and adrenaline. Shelia remained awake, keeping watch over the fire and the 20 sleeping wolves who were depending on her. The massive stranger's heartbeat was steady now against her chest, strong, powerful, alive. She should move away from him now that the immediate crisis had passed. But something kept her there. Some instinct she didn't understand. She must have dozed off eventually, because she woke to the sensation of movement. The stranger was stirring, his muscles tensing, his breathing changing. He was waking up. Shelia froze, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was, pressed against a powerful wolf she knew nothing about, with no way to defend herself if he attacked. His eyes opened, amber gold, glowing faintly in the firelight. They focused on her face with an intensity that stole her breath. For a long moment, neither of them moved. His gaze traveled over her, features, her face, her eyes, the curve of her neck where her omega scent would be strongest. Something flickered across his expression: confusion, recognition, wonder. "You," he whispered, his voice rough from cold and disuse. "It's you. I'm Shelia," she said carefully, keeping her voice low so she wouldn't wake the others. "You're safe. You're in a cave in Nightshade territory. You and your companions were caught in the blizzard. Do you remember?" He continued, staring at her like she was a ghost. "Or a miracle. How long have you been?" He gestured vaguely at their position, her body pressed against his. "You were hypothermic. Critical stage. You needed body heat." Her face burned. "I can move now if you're—" "Don't." His arm came around her waist, holding her in place, not threatening, gentle. "Please, you're warm." It was such a simple statement, but something in his voice made it sound like she was the first warmth he'd felt in years. "Who are you?" Shelia asked. "What were you doing out in that storm?" His jaw tightened. "Running. My pack was attacked 3 days ago, ambushed by hunters with silver weapons. These 4," he glanced at his sleeping companions, "are all that survived. 43 wolves slaughtered. We've been running ever since, trying to find shelter, trying to stay ahead of the hunters. The storm caught us in the open." Horror washed through her. 43 wolves dead, an entire pack decimated. "I'm so sorry. We would have died too, if you hadn't." He shook his head, something like awe in his expression. "You saved us. And Omega. You saved 5 rogue wolves without hesitation." "You weren't rogues," Shelia corrected. "You were wolves who needed help. That's all that mattered." He stared at her for so long that she started to feel uncomfortable. Then he reached up slowly, carefully, and touched her face with fingers that were finally warm. "What's your name again?" "Shelia Stanton. Omega, of the Nightshade Pack." "Shelia," he repeated, like he was memorizing it. "I'm Teodoro. Teodoro Wagner." The name meant nothing to her. "Should it?" He said it like it was significant, watching her face for recognition. "It's nice to meet you, Teodoro. Even under these circumstances." A strange smile crossed his face, sad and amused, and something else she couldn't identify. "You really don't know who I am? Should I?" "Most wolves would." He studied her face. "But then, most wolves haven't spent their lives being told they don't matter enough to learn pack politics and territorial hierarchies." Shelia flinched. How did he know that? Could he see it in her somehow, the years of dismissal and isolation? "The storm should pass by tomorrow afternoon," she said, changing the subject. "Once it's safe, we can help you get somewhere secure. Do you have allies in the region? Another pack that would take you in?" Teodoro's expression went carefully neutral. "It's complicated. My pack's destruction will have political ramifications across the entire territory. There will be those who want to help, and those who want to use our weakness against us. Then you need to be smart about who you trust," Shelia said. She understood that much. At least the brutal politics of pack hierarchy, even if she'd only ever witnessed it from the bottom. "Yes," Teodoro agreed quietly. "I need to be very smart about trust." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, a gesture so gentle it made her heart stutter. "Thank you, Shelia Stanton. For my life. For their lives. I won't forget this." "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said firmly. "They wouldn't have. You risked everything: your pack's anger, your own safety, your position to save wolves you didn't know. That's not common. That's not ordinary. That's—" He trailed off, but his eyes said what his mouth didn't. Extraordinary. No one had ever looked at Shelia like that before. Like she was valuable, important, worthy. She didn't know what to do with it. "You should sleep more," she said, her voice coming out shakier than she intended. "Your body needs rest to fully recover." Teodoro nodded slowly, but he didn't release her from his gentle hold. "Will you stay? Just until morning?" It was a bad idea. She barely knew him. He was a rogue wolf with a destroyed pack, and enemies hunting him. Getting attached would be stupid. But when she looked into those amber gold eyes, she couldn't seem to find the word no. "Until morning," she agreed. He smiled, a real smile this time, warm and genuine, and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into sleep. Shelia lay awake in the darkness, listening to the storm rage outside and the peaceful breathing of 20 sleeping wolves. Her arm was draped across Teodoro's chest, and she could feel his heartbeat under her palm. Strong, steady, alive because of her. Tomorrow they would wake up to complications. Her pack would demand answers for her disobedience. Teodoro and his companions would have to figure out where to go, how to survive. The fragile peace of this moment would shatter into difficult realities. But right now, in this cave, in this storm, with this stranger's warmth against her skin right now, Shelia felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she mattered. And she had no idea that the wolf sleeping peacefully in her arms was the Alpha King of the entire Northern Territories, that his pack's destruction would trigger a war, that his enemies would stop at nothing to finish what they'd started, or that by saving his life, she'd just painted the biggest target imaginable on her own back. The storm howled outside, but inside the cave, 20 wolves slept peacefully, for now. Chapter 4. Dawn and Danger. Dawn came with an eerie silence. Shelia woke to find the storm had finally exhausted itself, leaving behind a world buried in white. Pale light filtered through the cave entrance, illuminating the snowdrifts that had nearly sealed them in completely, and she woke to find Teodoro already awake, watching her with those unsettling amber eyes. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice still rough but stronger than last night. Shelia became acutely aware of their position, her leg thrown over his, her head on his chest, their bodies tangled together under the blankets. She scrambled backwards so fast she nearly fell. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, we were just hypothermia protocol." "Shelia." Teodoro sat up slowly, wincing as his stiff muscles protested. "It's fine, you saved my life. I'm not going to be offended that you kept me warm while doing it." Around the cave, other wolves were beginning to stir. Joni was already awake, sitting by the fire and watching Shelia with an unreadable expression. Several of the nightshade wolves were whispering among themselves, casting nervous glances at the 5 strangers. Teodoro's 4 companions were waking too. 3 men and 1 woman. All of them looking rough but alive. They moved immediately to their leader's side, their body language protective and deferential in a way that made Shelia's instincts prickle with unease. These weren't just any wolves. The way they carried themselves, the power radiating from them, even in their weakened state. These were high-ranking pack members. Maybe even Alpha, the woman said, dropping to one knee before Teodoro. "You're alive. Thank the moon, Alpha." Of course he was an alpha. Shelia had known that instinctively from his size and presence. But the formal address, the immediate submission from the others, suggested he was more than just any alpha. "I'm fine, Annette," Teodoro said, helping the woman to her feet. "Thanks to our hosts." He looked at Shelia. "All of you. This is Shelia Stanton. She's the reason we're not corpses frozen in the snow." 4 pairs of eyes turned to her with varying degrees of shock and gratitude. The woman Annette looked like she might cry. "An Omega saved us?" one of the men whispered, awe in his voice. "An Omega saved everyone," Teodoro corrected, gesturing to the nightshade wolves. 20 wolves alive because of her knowledge and courage. The praise made Shelia's skin prickle with discomfort. She wasn't used to being acknowledged, let alone praised. Especially not in front of her own pack. Guy Bolton chose that moment to approach, his alpha energy crackling with barely contained aggression. "Now that everyone's alive, we need to discuss the situation. You're rogues in Nightshade territory. Our elders will need to be informed." "We're not rogues," one of Teodoro's companions, a young man with kind eyes, interrupted. "We're refugees. There's a difference." "Not to our pack law," Guy shot back. "Unauthorized wolves in our territory are subject to." "To what?" Teodoro stood, and the temperature in the cave seemed to drop 10 degrees. His presence expanded, filling the space with a power that made every wolf in the cave instinctively tense, to execution, to imprisonment, to being turned away to die in the cold. Guy actually took a step back, his face paling. Whatever he'd been about to say died on his tongue. "Stop it." Shelia stepped between them, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Both of you. We're not doing this. Not after we all survived together." She looked at Guy. "They're not a threat. They're barely recovered from hypothermia. Show some mercy." Then she turned to Teodoro. "And you stop intimidating people. I know you're powerful, but throwing your weight around isn't going to help the situation. Dead silence. Every wolf in the cave stared at her like she'd grown a second head. And Omega, ordering an alpha to stand down, speaking to both sides like she had authority. It was so far beyond acceptable Omega behavior that several of the nightshade wolves actually gasped. But Teodoro, instead of being angry, smiled. Actually smiled. You're right. I apologize. He inclined his head to Guy, a gesture of respect between equals. We mean no disrespect to nightshade territory or pack law. We were fleeing for our lives and took shelter where we could find it. If you'll allow us to recover and resupply, we'll be gone by nightfall. The reasonable response seemed to catch Guy off guard. He looked to Joni, who'd been watching the entire exchange with sharp interest. We'll need to contact the elders, Joni said carefully. Get permission for you to remain temporarily. But until then you're under our protection as refugees who saved themselves and were saved. She met Shelia's eyes. My sister has vouched for you. That's enough for me. Sister. Joni had called her sister in front of everyone, with pride in her voice instead of shame. Something in Shelia's chest cracked open. Thank you, Teodoro said. Your generosity won't be forgotten. The tension eased slightly, though suspicion still lingered in several sets of eyes. The nightshade wolves began organizing themselves, assessing injuries, rationing remaining food, planning the dig-out from the snowdrifts. Shelia found herself pulled aside by Annette, Teodoro's female companion. Up close, she was striking, maybe 30 years old, with dark skin and warrior's scars. A beta, Shelia guessed, but high-ranking. I need to know something, Annette said quietly. Last night, when you helped the Alpha, did you recognize him? Know who he was? Should I have? Shelia asked, feeling stupid. He said his name was Teodoro Wagner. He said his pack was destroyed. That's all I know. Annette's eyes widened. You really don't know? She glanced back at Teodoro, who was deep in conversation with Joni. Moon above. An Omega who doesn't follow pack politics. I'm not allowed to follow pack politics, Shelia said, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. Omegas in the Nightshade pack are meant to serve, not to learn. That's barbaric, Annette said flatly. In our pack, every member is educated. Omega, Beta, Alpha knowledge is power for all. She paused. Or rather, in our former pack, before the massacre. The pain in her voice was raw. Shelia touched her arm gently. I'm sorry for your loss. All of you. The Alpha hasn't told you his full title, has he? Annette studied her face. He introduced himself as just Teodoro Wagner. Yes. Why? Is he famous or something? Annette laughed, a shocked, slightly hysterical sound. Or something. She leaned in closer. Shelia. The man you saved. The man you held skin to skin all night. The man you ordered to stand down like a misbehaving pup. That's Teodoro Wagner, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, ruler of 17 packs, the most powerful wolf in 1,000 miles. The words didn't make sense at first. Shelia heard them, but they bounced off her understanding like stones skipping on water. Alpha King, ruler of 17 packs, the most powerful wolf in 1,000 miles. That's not possible, Shelia whispered. The Alpha King wouldn't be out in a blizzard with only 4 companions. The Alpha King wouldn't need saving by an Omega. The Alpha King was ambushed by hunters who knew exactly where his pack would be and when, Annette said grimly. It was a coordinated attack. Someone betrayed us. Someone sold information about our patrol routes, our safe houses, our pack structure. The hunters hit us at dawn, when we were most vulnerable. 43 wolves dead in less than an hour. Shelia felt sick. Who would do that? Why? That's what we need to find out. But first, we need to get the Alpha somewhere safe, somewhere he can heal and plan. Annette gripped Shelia's shoulders. You saved his life. That creates a debt, a bond, that can never be broken in wolf culture. You're under his protection now, whether you want it or not. I don't want anything, Shelia protested. I just didn't want people to die. Too late. You're involved now. Annette glanced around the cave, her expression darkening. And when word gets out that the Alpha King survived, that someone sheltered him, saved him, every wolf with an agenda is going to come looking. including the ones who wanted him dead in the first place. Cold dread pooled in Shelia's stomach. Are you saying I'm in danger? My pack is in danger? I'm saying everything just got very complicated. Annette released her shoulders. The Alpha will protect you. He'd die before he let harm come to someone who saved his life. But Shelia, you need to understand what you've walked into. This isn't just about one destroyed pack. This is about a power vacuum that 17 packs will fight to fill. This is about whoever ordered that massacre trying to finish the job. This is about Annette. Teodoro's voice cut across the cave. He was standing now, fully dressed in clothes one of the Nightshade wolves had provided. Even in borrowed clothing, he radiated authority. Stop frightening her. She deserves to know the truth. Annette shot back. She does, Teodoro agreed. But not from you. Not like this. He approached them, his eyes never leaving Shelia's face. Walk with me. It wasn't really a question. An Alpha King didn't ask Omegas for permission, but he waited anyway, like her answer actually mattered. Shelia nodded, not trusting her voice. They made their way to the cave entrance, where the morning sun was turning the snow into a field of diamonds. The air was brutally cold but crystal clear, beautiful and deadly like everything in this new reality Shelia had stumbled into. You're angry that I didn't tell you who I was, Teodoro said quietly. I'm confused, Shelia corrected. You're the Alpha King. Why didn't you say something? Because for the first time in 10 years, someone looked at me and didn't see a title, didn't see power or politics or opportunity. He turned to face her, and there was something achingly vulnerable in his expression. You saw a wolf who needed help. You risked everything to provide it, not because of who I was, but because of who you are. I would have helped anyway, Shelia insisted. King or not. I know. That's why I didn't tell you. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, strong. Shelia, everything Annette said is true. My survival will trigger a war for succession. My enemies will come hunting, and you, the Omega who saved me, you're going to be targeted. Then I'll deal with it, Shelia said, with more confidence than she felt. You shouldn't have to deal with it alone. Teodoro's grip tightened on her hand. Come with me. When we leave, come with us. I can protect you. I can give you a life where your knowledge and strength are valued, not suppressed. Where being an Omega doesn't mean being invisible. The offer hung in the air between them, tempting and terrifying. Leave her pack. Leave the only home she'd ever known, no matter how cruel it had been. Follow a strange wolf, a king, into a political nightmare that could get her killed. It was insane. It was impossible. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of, and never dared to want. I can't, Shelia whispered. This is my pack. My family. Your prison, Teodoro finished. I saw how they treat you, Shelia. The dismissal, the contempt. You're worth 100 of them, and they can't even see it. My sister sees it now. Things are changing. One day of recognition doesn't erase years of abuse. His voice was gentle but firm. You deserve better. You deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated. Before Shelia could respond, Joni's voice called from inside the cave. Shelia, we've got a problem. They rushed back to find the cave in chaos. Tom Ward was standing at the entrance, his face pale, holding what looked like a tracking dart. I found it embedded in the snow outside, he said. It's fresh, from last night. Annette took the dart, her expression darkening. Silver-tipped. Hunter issue. She looked at Teodoro. They followed us here. How is that possible? Guy demanded. The storm would have covered any tracks. Unless they put a tracker on one of us before the ambush, Annette said grimly. She was already examining her companions, checking for wounds, for anything that might. She stopped at one of the male wolves, Muhammad Olsen. There, embedded beneath the skin of his shoulder blade, was a tiny chip. No, Muhammad breathed. No, I didn't know. I swear I didn't. It's not your fault, Teodoro said quickly. But his face had gone hard as stone. They planted it during the attack. Used you to track us. He looked at Shelia, and there was real fear in his eyes for the first time. We need to leave. Now. before they triangulate this location. If hunters are coming, we need to get the pack to safety, Joni said, already moving into crisis mode. Evacuate back to Packlands, warn the elders. They won't come for your pack, Annette interrupted. They're hunting us. But if we're here when they arrive, everyone in this cave becomes collateral damage. The implication hung heavy. Teodoro and his companions needed to run, draw the hunters away, save the Nightshade wolves by leaving them behind. Save everyone except the one Omega who'd risked everything to help them. Because, if the hunters had been watching, if they'd seen Shelia tending to Teodoro through the night, holding him, saving him, she was already marked. Teodoro saw the realization hit her face. Come with me, he said urgently, gripping both her hands now. Right now. We leave together, we run together, and I swear on my life, I will keep you safe. She's not going anywhere, Guy snarled. She's Nightshade Pack. She stays with us. She stays here, she dies, Teodoro shot back. The hunters will assume she helped me, they'll make an example of her. Then we'll protect her, Joni said fiercely. She's my sister. We take care of our own. Your own? Teodoro's voice was razor sharp. Where was this protection when she was sleeping in the servant quarters? When she was forbidden from learning? When she was treated like dirt beneath your feet? Joni flinched like she'd been slapped. Enough, Shelia shouted. 20 pairs of eyes snapped to her. Everyone stop fighting about me like I'm not standing right here. She took a shaking breath. If hunters are coming, we need to move fast. Teodoro, you and your companions head north. Create a clear trail for them to follow. Draw them away from Nightshade territory. And you? Teodoro asked. Though she could see he already knew her answer and hated it. I'm going back with my pack. I'll help evacuate, make sure everyone gets to safety, and then... She faltered. Then I'll figure it out. That's suicide, Annette said flatly. That's duty, Shelia corrected. These are my people. I don't abandon them just because things get dangerous. Teodoro looked at her for a long moment, something like awe and frustration warring on his face. Then he pulled her close so sudden she gasped and pressed something into her hand. A pendant. Silver and ancient, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. This is my family crest, he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. Any wolf who sees it will know you're under my protection. If you need help, if you're in danger, show this to any pack in the Northern Territories. They'll shelter you. I can't take this. You already saved my life. The least I can do is give you a way to save yours. He pulled back, his hands framing her face. This isn't over, Shelia Stanton. I will come back for you. I will make sure you're safe. And then if you'll have me, I will show you what it means to be valued the way you deserve. Before she could respond, he kissed her forehead. Brief, gentle, devastating. Then he was moving, gathering his companions, preparing to run. The four of them shifted partially enough to move fast, but not enough to be fully vulnerable. Within minutes, they were gone, disappearing into the white wilderness like ghosts, leaving Shelia standing at the cave entrance, a royal pendant burning in her palm, and the certain knowledge that her life had just changed forever. We need to move, Joni said, touching her shoulder. Come on, sister. Let's get you home. Home. The word felt wrong now. Foreign. Because Shelia was beginning to realize that home might not be a place at all. It might be a pair of amber gold eyes and a promise whispered in the cold. I will come back for you. She just had to survive long enough for him to keep it. Chapter 5. The Hunter's Shadow. The journey back to Nightshade territory took 6 brutal hours through chest-deep snow. Shelia walked near the back of the group, her mind spinning with everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. The pendant Teodoro had given her was hidden beneath her thermal shirt, resting against her heart. It felt warm, unnaturally warm, like it carried its own heat source. Or maybe that was just her imagination, trying to hold on to the last piece of him. You're quiet, Joni said, falling back to walk beside her. More than usual. Shelia glanced at her sister. In the harsh daylight, Joni looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her perfect hair matted and tangled. But there was something different in her expression, something softer. Just thinking, Shelia said. About the Alpha King? Shelia's head snapped up. How did you? I'm not stupid, Shelia. The way his companions deferred to him, the power he radiated, the fact that 5 wolves were being hunted with military precision, it wasn't hard to figure out. Joni's voice dropped lower. You saved the most important wolf in the territory. Do you understand what that means? Annette already gave me the speech about political complications and targets on my back. Good. Because it's all true. Joni grabbed her arm, stopping them both. The rest of the pack continued ahead, giving them privacy. Shelia, listen to me. When we get back, the elders are going to have questions. They're going to want to know everything: who you helped, why you disobeyed orders, what the Alpha King said to you. I'll tell them the truth. No, Joni said firmly. You'll tell them part of the truth. You helped wounded wolves. You didn't know who they were. They left before you could learn more. You do not mention that Teodoro Wagner gave you his family crest, or that he offered you protection, or that she paused, her eyes searching Shelia's face, that he looked at you like you were the answer to every prayer he's ever whispered. Heat flooded Shelia's cheeks. He didn't. I have eyes, sister. So does everyone else in that cave. Joni's grip tightened. The elders will use any connection between you and the Alpha King as leverage. Political advantage. They'll try to control you, manipulate you, maybe even offer you up to his enemies, to prove Nightshade Pack's neutrality in whatever war is coming. The word sent ice through Shelia's veins. Our own pack wouldn't. Our pack has treated you like garbage for 21 years, Joni interrupted. Don't suddenly trust them to protect you now, just because you did something heroic. Politics makes monsters of everyone. Before Shelia could respond, a howl split the air. Not from their group, from somewhere behind them. Everyone froze. That's not a wolf howl, Guy said, his voice tight with tension. That's a hunter's horn. They were being followed. Run, Joni commanded, her alpha voice cracking like a whip. Everyone back to Packlands now. The Nightshade wolves scattered into motion, running as fast as the deep snow would allow. Shelia's lungs burned as she pushed herself to keep up, her shorter omega legs struggling with the pace the alphas and betas set. Another horn blast. Closer this time. They're gaining on us, Tom shouted. Split up, Guy ordered. Small groups, different directions. Make them choose who to follow. No, Shelia screamed. The word tore from her throat with unexpected force, stopping everyone in their tracks. Don't you understand? They're not following the group. They're following me. Silence. Then Joni. What? They saw me with Teodoro. Saw me help him. I'm the one they want either to use as leverage or to eliminate as a witness. Shelia's mind was racing, falling into that same sharp clarity she'd felt in the cave. Strategy. Survival. If we split up, they'll track my scent specifically. Everyone else becomes collateral damage in their hunt. Then what do we do? Daniel asked, his eyes wide with fear. Shelia looked at the terrain around them. They were in a valley, with steep ridges on either side, and dense forest ahead. Behind them, maybe a half-mile back, she could see movement, dark shapes against the white snow. At least a dozen hunters, moving with military precision, too many to fight, too fast to outrun, but maybe, just maybe, smart enough to outsmart. I need your trust, Shelia said, looking at each member of the pack. Can you give me that? Just for the next hour? Joni didn't hesitate. Yes. What's your plan? Guy demanded. I'm going to lead them away. Draw them off your trail so you can get back to Packlands safely. Absolutely not, Joni snapped. You're not sacrificing yourself. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm buying time. Shelia was already stripping off her outer jacket, the one that would carry her scent strongest. You take my jacket. Continue toward Packlands in a tight group. Your combined scents will mask my absence for a while. I'll circle around through the forest, create a false trail heading east, then double back through the river to kill my scent. That's suicide, Guy said flatly. You'll freeze in the river. And if they catch you, they won't catch me. Shelia met his eyes. I know these territories better than anyone. I've spent years exploring every cave, every trail, every hiding spot. This is what I'm good at: being invisible, surviving alone. She smiled bitterly. Thanks for all that practice. The barb hit its mark. Several wolves flinched. Another horn blast. The hunters were less than a quarter-mile away now. "We don't have time to argue," Shelia said. She pressed her jacket into Joni's hands. "Get everyone home safely. That's your job. Survival is mine." "When will we know you're safe?" Joni asked, her voice breaking. "I'll send a signal. When I'm clear, Shelia thought fast. "I'll light a fire on Widow's Peak. You'll be able to see the smoke from Packlands. 3 columns of smoke means I'm safe. Anything else means I need help." It was a thin plan, full of holes and risks and 1,000 things that could go wrong. But it was the only plan they had. Joni pulled her into a fierce hug. "You come back to me, little sister. You hear me? You come back." "I will," Shelia whispered, hoping it wasn't a lie. She pulled away and ran not toward Packlands but perpendicular to their route, crashing through the snow with deliberate loudness, making sure the hunters would hear, making sure they would follow. Behind her, she heard Joni ordering the pack to move, their footsteps fading in the opposite direction. Ahead of her, the forest waited like a dark mouth ready to swallow her whole. And behind her, a shout. "There! The Omega! She's running!" They'd taken the bait. Shelia ran harder, her heart hammering against her ribs. The pendant Teodoro had given her bounced against her chest with each step, a small solid weight that somehow gave her courage. "I will come back for you." She just had to stay alive long enough for him to try. The forest was a maze of white and shadow. Shelia moved through it with practiced efficiency, using every trick she'd learned during her years of solitary exploration. She ran in zigzags, doubled back on her own trail, jumped from rock to rock to confuse the scent path. Behind her, she could hear the hunters spreading out, their calls coordinating like a military operation. These weren't amateur wolf hunters. These were professionals, trained, equipped, dangerous. After 20 minutes of hard running, Shelia reached the river she'd been aiming for, a narrow stream that cut through the valley, its water ice-cold but not yet frozen solid. This was the risky part. The water would kill her scent, but it could also kill her if she stayed in too long. She waded in, gasping as the cold hit her legs like knives. The current was strong, trying to pull her downstream. She fought against it, moving upstream for 100 yards before pulling herself out on the opposite bank. Her legs were already going numb. She had maybe 10 minutes before hypothermia set in. Shelia forced herself to keep moving, heading toward a cave system she knew about, a small shelter she'd stocked with emergency supplies during one of her preparatory trips months ago. It was another mile through the forest, but it was her best chance. The hunters' voices were fading behind her. Good. The river had worked. But then, a new sound. Mechanical. Growing louder. Helicopter. They'd brought a helicopter. Panic spiked through her. How did you hide from something that could see from above? The forest canopy was thick, but not thick enough. Not in winter, with bare branches and white snow making every dark shape visible. Shelia ran harder, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her wet legs screaming in protest. The cave was close now, just over the next ridge. The helicopter appeared above the tree line, its spotlight sweeping across the forest like the eye of some mechanical god. Shelia dove behind a fallen log, pressing herself into the snow, trying to become invisible. The spotlight passed over her position once, twice, moved on. She waited, not daring to breathe, until the helicopter's sound faded into the distance. They were searching the wrong section of forest. The river trick had worked better than she'd hoped. But they'd be back. Hunters this organized didn't give up after one pass. Shelia forced herself up and stumbled the last 100 yards to the cave entrance. It was small, barely large enough for one person, and partially hidden behind an overhang of rock. Perfect. She crawled inside, her body shaking violently now from cold and exhaustion. The emergency supplies were exactly where she'd left them. Blankets, fire-starting materials, dried food, water purification tablets, first aid kit. With trembling hands, she built a small fire deep in the cave where the smoke would dissipate before reaching the entrance. The warmth was heaven, but she knew she couldn't stay long. An hour, maybe 2, to warm up and regain her strength. Then she needed to move again, get to Widow's Peak. Send her signal. As she huddled by the fire, Shelia pulled out Teodoro's pendant. In the flickering light, she could see the symbols more clearly, intricate carvings that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle. Ancient magic, maybe. Or just beautiful craftsmanship. She traced the symbols with one finger, thinking about the wolf who'd given it to her, the Alpha King who'd looked at her like she mattered, who'd offered her a life where being an Omega didn't mean being nothing. A life that seemed impossibly far away now, with hunters in the forest and her own pack treating her like a liability they couldn't afford. "I will come back for you," Teodoro had promised. But what if she didn't want to wait? What if? A sound outside the cave. Footsteps crunching in snow. Shelia's hand flew to her knife, a small blade she'd brought for emergencies. It wouldn't do much against trained hunters, but it was better than nothing. The footsteps stopped right outside the cave entrance. A shadow blocked the light, and then a voice familiar, unexpected, terrifying. "Shelia, I know you're in there. We need to talk." It was her mother. Gail Fisher had found her. And from the cold edge in her voice, this wasn't a rescue. Chapter 6, A Mother's Betrayal. Shelia's hand tightened on the knife, as her mother's silhouette filled the cave entrance. "Put that away," Gail said, her voice carrying that same dismissive tone she'd used for years. "Don't be dramatic." "How did you find me?" Shelia asked, not lowering the blade. Her mother shouldn't have been able to track her, not through the river, not with all her precautions. Gail crawled into the cave, brushing snow from her jacket. In the firelight, she looked older than Shelia remembered. "Harder. I've known about your little hideouts for years. Did you really think I didn't notice you disappearing into the woods? That I didn't wonder where you went during your servant duties?" The revelation stung more than it should have. Even her secret places hadn't been secret. "Why are you here?" Shelia demanded. "The pack should be back at Packlands by now. You should be with them. I came to bring you home." Gail settled by the fire, warming her hands. "The elders want to speak with you. About the wolves you saved. About the Alpha King. How do you know about—" "Guy told us everything when we reached Packlands. The rogues you sheltered. The healing you provided. The pendant the Alpha King gave you." Gail's eyes dropped to Shelia's chest, where the pendant was hidden. "I need you to give it to me." "No." Gail's expression hardened. "Don't be foolish, Shelia. That pendant makes you a target. Every wolf with political ambitions will want to use you to get to the Alpha King. The kindest thing I can do is remove the temptation." "The kindest thing?" Shelia laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "When have you ever done the kind thing for me, Mother? You've spent 21 years making sure I knew exactly how disappointing I was. How worthless. How much of a burden. I was protecting you. You were punishing me." The words exploded out of Shelia, years of hurt and anger finally breaking free. "Punishing me for being an Omega. For not being Joni. For reminding you of a mate you wanted to forget. Don't pretend this was about protection." Gail flinched, but her voice remained cold. "Your father was weak. Omega blood is weak. I did what I had to do to make sure you survived in a world that has no mercy for weakness. By making sure I had no mercy from my own family. By making sure you understood your place." Gail snapped. "Do you have any idea what it's been like? Watching you waste your potential on books and radios and foolish dreams? You could have been a perfect Omega, obedient, useful, content with your station. Instead, you insisted on learning things that would only make you unhappy. Make you want things you could never have. Things like respect." Shelia shot back. "Like being treated as if I have value?" "Value?" Gail's laugh was harsh. "Let me tell you about value, daughter. The hunters who are searching for you right now? They're offering a reward. $50,000 for information leading to the capture of the Omega who aided the fugitive Alpha King. $50,000, Shelia. More money than most pack members will see in a lifetime." Ice flooded Shelia's veins. "You didn't." "I didn't," Gail said. "But others in the pack might. Do you understand now? That pendant makes you a commodity. A trading chip. The elders want to use you to negotiate with the Alpha King's enemies, offer you up as proof of Nightshade's neutrality in the coming war. So you came to warn me." Hope flickered in Shelia's chest, small and fragile. "I came to bring you in before someone else does." Gail reached out her hand. "Give me the pendant. Come home. Let the elders handle this. It's the only way you survive." "Survive as what? A prisoner? A hostage?" Shelia shook her head. I finally did something that mattered. I saved lives, 20 lives, and you want me to just hand myself over to be used as a bargaining chip? I want you to be realistic. Gale's composure was cracking. You are one Omega against an entire territory of politics and power. The Alpha King made you a pretty promise, gave you a pretty pendant. And then he ran. He left you here to face the consequences alone. He was protecting his people, drawing the hunters away. He was protecting himself. Gale interrupted. Wake up, Shelia. You're not special to him. You're a debt, a responsibility he'll fulfill when it's convenient and not a moment before. Meanwhile, you're out here freezing in a cave, being hunted by professionals, throwing away your only chance at safety. Safety? Shelia stood, the small cave suddenly feeling suffocating. I've never been safe, Mother. Not in the pack that's supposed to protect me. Not in the house I grew up in. Not with the family that's supposed to love me. At least out here, I know exactly where the danger is coming from. Gale stood as well, her beta aura flaring with frustration. You're being childish, emotional. This is exactly why Omegas need guidance. You let feelings override sense. My feelings kept 20 wolves alive through a blizzard, Shelia said quietly. My feelings taught me skills that saved the Alpha King's life. Maybe feelings aren't the weakness you think they are. They stood facing each other across the small fire, years of hurt and disappointment and failed love between them like an unbridgeable chasm. If you don't come with me willingly, Gale said slowly, I'll have no choice but to tell the elders where you are. They'll send a retrieval team. You'll be brought back by force. You'd do that to your own daughter? I'd do that to save your life. Gale's voice softened, just slightly. Shelia, please. I know I've been hard on you. I know I've failed you in ways I can't take back. But let me protect you now. Let me do this one thing right. For a moment, just a moment, Shelia wanted to believe her, wanted to think that underneath the years of coldness, her mother actually loved her. But then she saw it. The slight shift in Gale's eyes toward the cave entrance. The tension in her shoulders that suggested she wasn't alone. How many? Shelia asked quietly. What? How many wolves did you bring with you? How many are waiting outside right now to make sure I come home willingly? Gale's silence was answer enough. I see. Shelia felt something break inside her chest, the last fragile hope that family could mean something more than obligation and disappointment. You brought backup, just in case the emotional manipulation didn't work. Shelia, get out. We're trying to help you. Get out. The command came from somewhere deep inside Shelia, from a place she didn't know she had. Not an alpha voice, she'd never have that. But something else. Something that made Gale actually step back. You're making a mistake, Gale said, her face hardening back into familiar coldness. A mistake you'll regret. The only mistake I made was thinking you might actually care. Shelia's hand went to the pendant around her neck. Tell the elders I'm not coming back. Tell them I'm under the Alpha King's protection. And tell them that if they try to use me as a political pawn, they'll find out exactly what that protection means. Gale stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned and crawled out of the cave without another word. Shelia waited, listening. She heard voices outside, Gale talking to someone, probably Elder Underwood and a few enforcers. Heard them discussing options, strategies, whether to storm the cave or wait her out. She didn't give them the chance to decide. The cave had a back exit, a narrow passage that Shelia had discovered months ago. It was barely wide enough for her small frame, and it led to a steep drop-off on the other side of the ridge. Dangerous. Nearly impassable in winter. Perfect. Shelia gathered her emergency supplies, kicked snow over the fire, and crawled into the back passage. Behind her, she heard shouts. They'd realized she was escaping. The passage was dark and tight, scraping her shoulders and hips as she wriggled through. Her breath came in short gasps, panic clawing at her throat. What if she got stuck? What if they caught her in here, trapped like an animal? Then she saw light ahead. The exit. Shelia burst out onto a narrow ledge overlooking a 40-foot drop into a snowbank. Behind her, someone was entering the passage, too large to follow easily, but determined to try. No time to think. No time to be scared. Shelia jumped. The fall was terrifying and exhilarating, the ground rushing up to meet her. She hit the snowbank hard enough to knock the air from her lungs, sinking deep into the powder. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't move. buried alive in white cold. Then her survival instincts kicked in. She clawed her way up, breaking through the surface, gasping for air. Above her, on the ledge, she saw shapes wolves staring down at the jump she'd just made, the jump no sane person would attempt. But Sheila was learning that sanity was overrated when you were fighting for your life. She ran through the forest, following paths only she knew about. Away from the cave, away from her pack, away from the mother who'd chosen duty over love one too many times. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed, the cold bit through her wet clothes like teeth, but she kept running. Because somewhere out there, Teodoro had promised to come back for her. And somewhere deeper inside herself, Sheila was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was worth coming back for. The pendant burned warm against her chest, a small piece of proof that someone had seen her, really seen her, had valued her enough to offer protection, even knowing it would cost him. Widow's Peak was still miles away. The signal fire she'd promised Joni would have to wait. Right now, survival meant moving, staying ahead of the wolves who wanted to use her, and the hunters who wanted to eliminate her. But as she ran through the darkening forest, Sheila felt something she'd never felt before. Freedom. It was cold and terrifying and lonely, but it was hers, and she was never going back. Chapter 7. The King's Return. 3 days. Sheila had been running for 3 days, surviving on emergency rations and melted snow, sleeping in shallow caves and beneath fallen trees, always moving, always listening for the sounds of pursuit. The hunters had given up after the first day, either convinced she'd frozen to death or deciding she wasn't worth the continued effort. But the Nightshade pack was more persistent. She'd spotted search parties twice, heard their howls echoing through the valleys at night. They wanted her back. Whether to protect her or control her, she didn't know anymore. Now she crouched on a ridge overlooking the Eastern Territories, watching the sun set over mountains she'd never explored before. This far from pack lands, the air smelled different, wilder, free of the political tensions and social hierarchies that had defined her entire life. Her supplies were running low. Another day, maybe 2, and she'd have to either find a settlement or risk hunting, which would mean making a kill that could draw attention from every predator in the region, human and wolf alike. The pendant around her neck had stopped feeling warm 2 days ago. She tried not to think about what that meant. Maybe it had never been magic at all. Maybe it had just been her imagination, desperately wanting to believe that someone cared. Sheila pulled out the pendant, examining it in the fading light. The symbols seemed duller now, or maybe that was just exhaustion playing tricks on her eyes. She traced them with a fingertip, wondering if Teodoro had made it to safety, if his 4 companions were still alive, if he ever thought about the Omega who'd saved his life and then disappeared into the wilderness. Probably moved on to more important things, she whispered to the empty air. Alpha Kings don't waste time on. A twig snapped behind her. Sheila spun, her knife already in her hand, her heart hammering. The ridge behind her was empty, just trees and shadows, and a wolf stepped out from behind a pine tree, massive, dark-furred, with amber eyes that glowed in the twilight. Teodoro. He shifted as she watched, his wolf form flowing seamlessly into his human shape. He was wearing different clothes now, dark, tactical gear that made him look even more dangerous than before. But his expression when he saw her was pure relief. Sheila. He breathed. She wanted to run to him, wanted to throw herself into his arms and sob with relief that she wasn't alone anymore. Instead, she tightened her grip on her knife and stayed exactly where she was. How did you find me? Her voice came out harder than she intended. 3 days of paranoia and fear had made her suspicious of everyone, even him. The pendant. Teodoro took a slow step forward, hands visible and non-threatening. It's bonded to my family line. I can sense it within a 50-mile radius. I've been tracking you for 2 days. 2 days? Anger flared hot in her chest. You've known where I was for 2 days and you're only showing up now? I had to make sure it was safe. Another step closer. That I wasn't leading hunters or your pack directly to you, that I wasn't walking into a trap designed to use you as bait. His voice roughened. Sheila, I've watched you from a distance for 48 hours, watched you run yourself into exhaustion, watched you sleep with that knife in your hand, jerking awake at every sound. Do you have any idea how hard it was not to go to you immediately? You should have. The words came out broken. You should have come. I've been so scared and so alone, and I thought. She stopped, swallowing hard. I thought maybe the pendant was just a meaningless gesture, that your promise to come back was something you said to make yourself feel better about leaving. Teodoro closed the distance between them in 3 long strides, pulling her against his chest before she could protest. His arms came around her, solid and warm and real. I always keep my promises, he said into her hair. Always. And I promise to come back for you. Shalia's knife clattered to the ground as she grabbed fistfuls of his jacket, finally letting herself shake apart. 3 days of terror and exhaustion and loneliness came pouring out in ragged sobs she couldn't control. Teodoro held her through it, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring comfort in a language she didn't understand but somehow knew anyway. Old wolf speech. Ancient promises of protection and safety. When she finally calmed enough to breathe normally, she pulled back to look at him. Your companions? Are they safe? Hidden in a secure location about 30 miles north. We led the hunters on a chase through 4 territories before finally losing them in a river system. His thumb brushed away the tears on her cheek, but I couldn't stay there. Not when I could feel you running. Feel your fear through the bond. Bond? Shalia's hand went to the pendant. What bond? Teodoro's expression shifted, became careful in a way that made her nervous. When I gave you the pendant, I performed an old ritual, a protection bond. It connects us on a level deeper than pack or family. I can sense your location, your emotional state, your danger level. It's not something done lightly. You bonded me without asking permission. She should be angry, should feel violated by the lack of consent, but all she felt was relief that she hadn't been as alone as she'd thought. I'm sorry, Teodoro said. There wasn't time to explain, and I needed to know you'd be safe. If I'd known you'd end up running for your life through the wilderness, I would have... He stopped, jaw clenching. Tell me what happened. Why are you out here alone? So Shalia told him. About the hunters tracking them back from the cave. About her plan to lead them away. About her mother finding her and demanding the pendant. About the elders wanting to use her as a political pawn. About jumping off a 40-foot ledge to escape her own pack. By the time she finished, Teodoro's eyes were glowing amber with barely controlled rage. They tried to trade you, he said, his voice lethal quiet. Your own pack tried to use you as a bargaining chip. They were scared, making strategic decisions. They were cowards. Teodoro gripped her shoulders. And I'm going to make sure they understand exactly what they've lost by treating you that way. What do you mean? I mean, you're never going back to Nightshade Pack. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. You're coming with me, officially, under my protection as Alpha King. Shalia's heart stuttered. I can't just abandon my pack. They abandoned you first. His voice softened. Shalia, listen to me. Your sister Joni has been searching for you. She's defied the elders, gone against direct orders, trying to find you and bring you home safely. She loves you. I don't doubt that. But one wolf's love isn't enough to protect you from a pack that sees you as a commodity. Where would I even go? The question came out small, scared. I don't have anywhere else. You have me. Teodoro's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You have my pack, what's left of it. You have every resource and protection the Northern Territories can offer. And more than that. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. You have a place where your skills and knowledge and courage are valued. Where being an Omega doesn't mean being invisible. It was everything she'd ever wanted. Everything she'd dreamed about during long, lonely nights in the servant quarters. And it terrified her. I don't know how to be anything other than what I've always been, Shalia whispered. Then I'll teach you. Teodoro pressed his forehead against hers. The way you taught me that kindness still exists in this brutal world. That someone could save a stranger's life without expecting anything in return. That an Omega's strength can mean the difference between life and death for a king. I'm not strong. I'm just... You jumped off a cliff to escape captivity. You survived 3 days alone in the wilderness, with hunters, and your own pack searching for you. You saved 20 wolves from a blizzard and never once asked for recognition or reward. His voice was fierce. Shalia Stanton, You are the strongest wolf I've ever met. And I'm begging you to let me show you what your life could be like, if you were valued the way you deserve. And if I say yes?" Her voice trembled. "If I go with you, what happens then?" "Then we go north to my secure location. We regroup with my companions. We figure out who betrayed my pack and why. We build a new power base and make sure my enemies understand that the Alpha King isn't dead, he's just getting started." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "And through all of it, you're at my side. Not as a servant or a political pawn or a debt to be paid, but as someone I value, someone I trust, someone I—" He stopped himself, but Shelia heard what he didn't say. "Someone I'm falling for." The realization should have been shocking. They'd known each other for less than a week, had spent maybe 12 hours actually together. This was insane. But when she looked into his amber eyes, she saw the same truth she felt in her own chest. Sometimes recognition was instant. Sometimes souls knew each other before minds caught up. "Okay," Shelia said. "Okay, I'll come with you." She took a shaking breath. "I'll leave Nightshade Pack. I'll go north with you. I'll help you rebuild and fight and whatever else you need. Because you're right, I deserve better than what they've given me. And maybe," she touched his face, feeling brave for the first time in her life, "maybe I deserve someone who sees me the way you do." Teodoro's smile was brilliant, transforming his face from dangerous to beautiful. "We leave at dawn. Tonight we rest. Actually rest. Without fear or running or sleeping with knives in our hands." "Where?" "There's a safe house 2 miles west. One of many I've established throughout the territories. Food, warm beds, security measures. We'll be safe there." Safe. The word felt foreign. Impossible. But when Teodoro took her hand and led her down from the ridge, Shelia felt something close to hope beginning to bloom in her chest. Behind them, in the direction of Nightshade territory, a howl rose into the night sky. Joni's voice, Shelia recognized. Still searching, still trying. "I should let her know I'm okay," Shelia said. "We'll send word tomorrow." Teodoro squeezed her hand. "Tonight let yourself be selfish. Let yourself rest without worrying about everyone else first." They walked through the darkening forest, following paths only Teodoro knew, heading towards safety and warmth and the beginning of something new. Above them, the first stars were appearing in the clear winter sky, and around Shelia's neck, the pendant had started glowing warm again, as if it knew she'd finally made the right choice. Or maybe it was just responding to its master's proximity. Either way, Shelia let herself believe in the warmth. Let herself believe in the promise of protection and value, and something that might someday be more than survival. For the first time in her life, she was choosing her own path, and it led directly toward the wolf who'd looked at her and seen someone worth saving, even if she was still learning to see it in herself. Chapter 8. War Room Confessions. The safe house was built into the side of a mountain, camouflaged so perfectly that Shelia would have walked right past it if Teodoro hadn't shown her the hidden entrance. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable. A single large room with a stone fireplace, a bed with actual mattresses, storage cabinets stocked with supplies, and even a small bathroom with running water fed from an underground spring. "I have about 30 of these scattered throughout the territories," Teodoro explained as he started a fire. "Established them over the years for emergencies. Never thought I'd actually need them to hide from my own people." "Your own people didn't betray you," Shelia said, settling onto the floor near the growing flames. "Someone pretending to be your people did. That's what we need to figure out." Teodoro pulled out 2 containers of preserved food from the storage cabinet. The attack was too coordinated, too precise. They knew exactly where we'd be, exactly when our guard would be down, exactly which wolves were worth killing first. His voice went hard. "That level of intelligence could only come from inside my pack." Shelia accepted the food he offered, some kind of stew that tasted better than anything she'd eaten in days. "You said 43 wolves died. How many were in your pack originally?" 68. The number came out flat, emotionless, but Shelia could see the grief underneath. 25 survivors scattered across the territories. Most went into hiding immediately. A few tried to reach allied packs for shelter, and 5, he gestured to himself, ended up freezing to death in a blizzard until a stubborn Omega decided to be heroic. Not heroic, just human. Shelia paused. Or wolf. Whatever. Teodoro's laugh was soft, genuine. You're definitely wolf. The good kind, the kind that remembers we're supposed to be pack animals, that we survive by helping each other, not tearing each other apart. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the warmth from the fire slowly seeping into Shelia's frozen bones. She hadn't realized how cold she'd been until now. 3 days of constant movement and fear had kept her from acknowledging her body's needs. You should shower, Teodoro said, reading her exhaustion. Get warm. I'll keep watch. The offer was too tempting to refuse. Shelia made her way to the small bathroom, where she discovered the underground spring had been rigged with a heating system that produced gloriously warm water. She stood under the spray for what felt like hours, washing away 3 days of dirt and fear and exhaustion. When she emerged, wrapped in an oversized towel, Teodoro had laid out clean clothes on the bed, thermal pants, and a soft sweater that were obviously meant for someone much larger. They'll be huge on you, he said apologetically. But they're warm. Shelia dressed quickly, rolling up sleeves and pant legs. The clothes smelled like Teodoro pine and winter wind, and something uniquely him that made her omega instincts purr with contentment. She should be disturbed by that reaction. Should be maintaining professional distance from a wolf she barely knew, alpha king or not, but she was tired of should. Tired of following rules that had never protected her anyway. Your turn, she said, settling on the bed. You've been tracking me for 2 days, you need rest too. Teodoro looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. He showered quickly, and when he emerged, Shelia's breath caught. She'd seen him shirtless before hypothermia treatment required it, but that had been medical necessity, clinical and focused on survival. This was different. This was Teodoro in his own space, guard partially down, looking more human and vulnerable than she'd seen him. The scars covering his body told stories of violence and survival. Some were old, faded to white lines. Others were fresh, pink and angry, probably from the massacre that had destroyed his pack. It's ugly, I know, he said, catching her staring. It's survival, Shelia corrected. Each scar is proof you lived through something that tried to kill you. There's nothing ugly about that. Something shifted in his expression, gratitude and surprise, and that same vulnerability she'd glimpsed before. He dressed in similar thermal clothes, then hesitated by the bed. I can sleep on the floor. Give you privacy. Don't be ridiculous. The bed is big enough for both of us. Shelia pulled back the covers, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. Besides, we've already slept pressed together during the hypothermia thing. This is actually less intimate. Teodoro's smile was slow and amused. You're right. Though I was unconscious for most of that, so I didn't get to appreciate it properly. Heat flooded Shelia's cheeks. Just get in the bed before I change my mind and make you sleep in the snow. He laughed, a real, full laugh that transformed his face and made him look years younger. Then he climbed into bed beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. They lay in the darkness, listening to the fire crackle and the wind whistle outside. Shelia should have fallen asleep immediately. Her body was screaming for rest. But her mind wouldn't stop racing. Teodoro? She whispered. What happens now? I mean, long term. You can't hide in safe houses forever. You're the Alpha King. Don't you have responsibilities? Territories to manage? Packs that need leadership? Silence. Then, honestly, I don't know. The pack structure I built over 10 years was destroyed in an hour. The alliances I carefully maintained are all suspect now. The wolves who pledged loyalty might have been the ones who betrayed me. He shifted, and she felt him turn toward her in the darkness. For the first time in my life, I have no plan. No strategy. No clear path forward. That must be terrifying for you. It's oddly freeing. His voice was soft. I've been the Alpha King since I was 23, spent every day making decisions that affected thousands of lives, carrying the weight of expectations and traditions and political necessities. Now all of that is stripped away. I'm just me. Teodoro, a wolf trying to survive and figure out what comes next. Shelia turned toward him too, though she could barely make out his features in the darkness. And what do you want to come next, if you could choose anything? Justice for my pack. Answers about who betrayed us and why. Safety for the wolves who survived. He paused. And I want to know more about the Omega who saved my life. The one who jumps off cliffs and survives blizzards and looks at a king like he's just a person who needed help. I don't know that much about myself, Shelia admitted. I've spent my whole life being told what I am: weak, disposable, insignificant. I never got the chance to figure out who I am underneath all that conditioning. Then maybe we figure it out together. Teodoro's hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. Two wolves with no clear path, learning who they are outside the roles they were forced into. It should have been a terrifying prospect. Instead, it felt like possibility. I'd like that, Shelia whispered. They fell silent again, hands linked, breathing evening out. Shelia felt herself drifting toward sleep, finally safe enough to let go. A sharp knock on the door jolted them both upright. Teodoro was moving before Shelia could blink, pulling a knife from somewhere and positioning himself between her and the door. His entire demeanor had shifted from vulnerable companion to lethal predator. Who knows about this location? Shelia breathed. Only 4 wolves. My companions. They shouldn't be here. We agreed to maintain separation until it was safe. His eyes glowed amber in the darkness. Unless something's gone wrong. Another knock. Then a voice. Alpha, it's Annette. I'm alone. We have a problem. Teodoro relaxed slightly but kept the knife. He moved to the door, checking the peephole before opening it just enough to confirm it was actually Annette and she wasn't being coerced. The woman who'd helped Shelia in the cave stumbled inside, looking exhausted and terrified. Blood stained her jacket. They found us. Annette gasped. The hunters. They hit the safe house 2 hours ago. We barely got out alive. The others? Teodoro demanded. Safe. We split up, different directions. But Alpha. Annette's eyes found Shelia, widened with recognition, then returned to Teodoro. They're not just hunting you anymore. They're specifically hunting her. The Omega. They're offering $100,000 now, dead or alive. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Why? Shelia heard herself ask. I'm nobody. Why would hunters care about me? Annette pulled out a folded paper from her jacket, a wanted poster. She spread it on the table, and Shelia's face stared back at her from a grainy photograph someone must have taken during the cave rescue. But it was the text below that made her blood run cold. Wanted, Shelia Stanton Omega, of Nightshade Pack Reward, $100,000 crime. Harboring the Alpha King, enemy of the Council. What council? Shelia whispered. Teodoro's jaw was clenched so tight she could hear his teeth grinding. The Northern Territories Council. 6 Alpha leaders who've been trying to consolidate power for years. I've been blocking their attempts to centralize control, maintain pack autonomy. He looked at Annette. They're behind this. The massacre wasn't about eliminating my pack, it was about eliminating me. And now they know the Alpha King is alive because an Omega saved him, Annette said. Which makes her a threat. Evidence that someone helped you survive. A witness to the attack. And, she hesitated, glancing between them, potentially a mate bond. If the rumors are true. There's no mate bond, Teodoro said quickly, too quickly. But Shelia felt the lie in her chest. Felt the way the pendant around her neck had been glowing warmer every hour she spent with him. Felt the recognition that had struck her the moment she'd looked into his eyes. The bond doesn't matter right now, Annette said. What matters is that 6 alphas who want you dead now want her dead too. And they've got the resources to make it happen. Teodoro turned to Shelia, his expression fierce. Then we make sure it doesn't happen. We go on the offensive. Find out which council members betrayed me, expose them, and take back control of the territories. How? Shelia asked. You have 4 companions and a wanted Omega. They have 6 packs, unlimited resources, and every hunter in the region on their payroll. We have something they don't. Teodoro's smile was sharp and dangerous. We have the moral high ground. We have the truth, and we have an Omega who's smarter than every alpha I've ever met. He looked at Annette. Contact the others. New rally point. He rattled off coordinates. 48 hours. Tell them to bring every piece of evidence they can find about the council's activities. Financial records, communications, anything. You're building a case, Shelia realized. to present to the other packs, to prove the council is corrupt. I'm building a revolution, Teodoro corrected. And you're going to help me lead it. It was insane, impossible, a suicide mission. But as Sheila looked at the wanted poster with her face on it, she realized she didn't have a choice anymore. They'd made her an enemy. They'd put a price on her head, so she might as well earn it. Okay, she said. Let's burn their world down. Teodoro's smile was brilliant and terrifying. And somewhere in the back of Sheila's mind, a small voice whispered that this was what she'd been preparing for her entire life. All those years of studying alone, learning survival and strategy and how to be invisible. She'd thought it was about enduring. Turned out, it was about revolution. Chapter 9. The Wolf Who Knew Too Much. The rally point was an abandoned mining facility deep in the disputed territories, land that belonged to no pack, claimed by none, and therefore perfect for wolves who needed to disappear. Sheila, Teodoro, and Annette arrived first, spending hours clearing the main building and establishing security perimeters. By the time the other three companions arrived, Mohammed, Daniel, and Luella, the space had been transformed into a functional war room. You look different, Luella said, studying Sheila with sharp eyes. The older woman was a healer. Sheila had learned, and had the uncanny ability to see beneath surfaces, stronger, like you finally stopped apologizing for existing. I've had a lot of practice running for my life, Sheila said dryly. It's amazing what survival instinct can do for your confidence. Luella's laugh was approving. I like her, Alpha. She's got spine. She's got more than spine, Teodoro said, spreading maps across the makeshift table they'd constructed from old equipment. She's got strategy. Sheila, show them what you found over the past 48 hours. While traveling to the rally point, Sheila had been studying everything Teodoro and Annette could tell her about the Northern Territories Council. 6 alphas who supposedly governed through consensus but who, according to Teodoro's records, had been systematically accumulating power for years. The council doesn't just want control, Sheila explained, pointing to the map where she'd marked each council member's territory. They want consolidation. Look at the pattern. Every pack that's been integrated into council authority over the past 5 years has been strategically located. They're building a corridor of unified territory that cuts through the mountains to the coast. Trade route, Mohammed said, understanding dawning. They're trying to control commerce. Not just commerce, migration routes, hunting grounds, everything. Sheila pulled out another document, financial records Annette had managed to salvage before fleeing. And they're using pack resources to fund private ventures, construction projects that benefit council members personally, mining operations that destroy traditional hunting grounds. They've been systematically dismantling pack autonomy and replacing it with corporate structure. Silence. Then Daniel whistled low. That's not just corrupt. That's treason against wolf culture itself. Which is why they needed Teodoro dead, Annette added. He was the only alpha with enough authority to challenge them. The only one who could call for an investigation and actually be heard. So they manufactured a hunter attack, Sheila continued. Made it look like human aggression instead of wolf politics. Eliminated the threat while maintaining plausible deniability. Except they failed, Teodoro said quietly. Because an Omega decided to be heroic in a snowstorm. All eyes turned to Sheila. She felt the weight of their attention, these wolves who'd lost everything, who were looking to her to help them understand what came next. The council made a mistake, Sheila said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. They assumed killing the Alpha King would create a power vacuum they could fill. But what they actually did was create a martyr. And martyrs are dangerous, especially ones who survive. So what's the play? Luella asked. We can't exactly walk into council headquarters and accuse them of murder. No, Teodoro agreed. But we can expose them to the other packs, force them to answer questions publicly, create enough doubt that their authority crumbles. How? Mohammed challenged. Every pack in the region is either allied with the council or too afraid to oppose them. Who's going to listen to 5 refugees and a wanted Omega? The packs will listen, said a new voice from the doorway. If the accusations come from someone they trust. Everyone spun, weapons drawn, as a figure stepped out of the shadows. Sheila's heart stopped. It was Joni. Her sister looked terrible, thinner than Sheila remembered, with dark circles under her eyes and clothes that suggested days of hard travel. But her alpha presence was strong, her spine straight. "How did you find us?" Teodoro demanded, positioning himself between Joni and Shelia. "I followed Shelia's scent from the safe house 2 days ago. Then I tracked Annette here." Joni's eyes found Shelia's, filled with desperate relief. "Little sister. Thank the moon. I've been searching for you for a week." "Joni, what are you doing here?" Shelia's voice came out shakier than she intended. "How did you even—" "I left the pack." The words dropped like stones. "After Mother told the elders where you were hiding, after they tried to use you as a bargaining chip, I couldn't stay. I challenged Mother's authority, denounced the elders' decision, and walked away." "You left Nightshade Pack?" Shelia could barely comprehend it. "But you're the golden child. The future Beta. You had everything." "I had nothing that mattered," Joni interrupted. "Not if it meant betraying my sister. Not if it meant being part of a pack that treats Omegas like commodities." She took a cautious step forward. "Shelia, I'm so sorry. For years of blindness. For letting them hurt you. For not standing up for you when it mattered. Why now?" The question came out harsh, defensive. "Why suddenly care after 21 years? Because I watched you save 15 wolves who treated you like garbage," Joni said simply. "Because I saw you jump off a cliff rather than be captured. Because somewhere along the way, my little sister became the bravest person I've ever met, and I was too proud and stupid to see it." The words cracked something open in Shelia's chest, years of hurt and longing for her sister's approval, finally acknowledged. "That's very touching," Annette said, her voice hard, "but it doesn't explain why we should trust you. For all we know, you led Nightshade Pack right to us. I came alone. I made sure of it." Joni pulled out a backpack, tossing it onto the table. "And I brought something that might help your case against the council." Teodoro opened the pack carefully, pulling out files and documents. His eyes widened as he read. "Where did you get these?" "Elder Underwood's private office. Before I left, I broke in and copied everything I could find." Joni's smile was sharp. "Turns out our dear elder has been taking payments from the council for years, in exchange for information about border activities, strategic locations." And she looked at Shelia. "Detailed reports about a certain Omega who spent her free time mapping territories and establishing supply caches." Ice flooded Shelia's veins. "They knew. The council knew about my hideouts before the attack. They've been watching you for months," Joni confirmed. "Ever since Elder Underwood reported that an Omega was exhibiting unusual intelligence and strategic thinking. The council wanted to know if you were a potential asset or threat. And when I saved the Alpha King, I became a threat," Shelia finished. "You became the witness who could expose their entire operation," Joni corrected. "The proof that the Alpha King didn't die in a random hunter attack, but survived because of preparation and intelligence. If you testified about what you saw, about the tracking dart, about the coordinated nature of the attack, it would destroy their narrative." Teodoro was still reading through the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is everything. Communication records, financial transfers, instructions to insert the tracker into Muhammad during the initial attack." He looked up, and his eyes were burning with controlled rage. "This is enough to bring formal charges against the council. To demand an inquiry from the Greater Territories Alliance. The Alliance hasn't intervened in northern politics in 50 years. Muhammad protested. "They won't care about internal power struggles. They'll care about genocide disguised as human aggression," Teodoro interrupted. "They'll care about corruption that threatens the entire wolf governance structure. And they'll care because an Alpha King is demanding it." He turned to Joni. "Why help us? What do you get out of this?" "I get to do the right thing for once in my privileged life," Joni said. "And maybe if my sister will allow it, I get a chance to be the family I should have been all along." Shelia looked at her sister, saw the genuine regret and determination in her eyes, saw the way she'd risked everything to make amends. "You can't go back," Shelia said quietly. "Once you help us, Nightshade Pack will disown you completely. Mother will never forgive you. You'll be a rogue or worse, a traitor. I know. You'll lose everything you've worked for. Everything you were supposed to become. I know that too." Joni's smile was sad but certain. "But I'll gain something more important. my integrity, and maybe hopefully my sister's forgiveness. Sheila wanted to be cautious, wanted to protect herself from more disappointment and betrayal, but she was tired of walls, tired of letting past hurt determine future possibilities. "Okay," she said. "You can help. You can stay." Joni's expression crumpled with relief. She looked like she wanted to hug Sheila but wasn't sure if she was allowed. Sheila made the decision for her, crossing the space and pulling her sister into an embrace that was awkward and uncertain but real. "Thank you," Joni whispered. "I won't let you down again. I swear it." "You'd better not," Sheila said, pulling back. "Because I'm done being the forgiving Omega who accepts scraps of affection. You want to be my sister? Then be my sister. All the way. No more conditional love. Deal." Joni's smile was watery but genuine. "This is all very emotional," Luella said dryly, "but we still have 6 corrupt alphas trying to kill us. Can we focus on strategy now?" Teodoro laughed, the sound releasing some of the tension in the room. "Right, strategy." He spread the documents out, organizing them into categories. "We have evidence. We have witnesses. What we need now is a platform. A way to present this information publicly where the council can't suppress it." "The winter gathering," Joni said immediately. "It's in 3 weeks. Every pack in the Northern Territories sends representatives. The council will be there because they're hosting it." "That's their home territory," Annette protested. "We'd be walking into a trap, or we'd be forcing them to answer charges in front of hundreds of witnesses," Teodoro countered. "The gathering is sacred ground. They can't violate hospitality laws without losing all credibility." "They already violated every other law," Mohammed pointed out. "What makes you think they'll honor hospitality?" "Because the other packs will be watching," Shelia said, understanding dawning. "The council's power comes from the appearance of legitimacy. If they attack us during the gathering, they expose themselves as tyrants. But if they let us speak, we expose them as corrupt. Either way, they lose." "It's still incredibly dangerous," Luella said. "We'll be outnumbered 20-1. Then we make sure we're not alone," Teodoro said. He looked at each of them in turn. "We spend the next 3 weeks building alliances, reaching out to packs who've been hurt by council policies, gathering more witnesses, creating a coalition that can't be ignored or silenced. And we train," Annette added, looking at Sheila. "If this goes wrong, if it turns into a fight, we need to make sure everyone can defend themselves, including the Omega who's never had combat training." Sheila opened her mouth to protest that she knew how to defend herself, then closed it. Because Annette was right. She knew how to survive, how to strategize, how to outwit. But actual fighting, against trained warriors? She was a liability. "Teach me," she said. "I don't want to be the weak link that gets everyone killed." Annette's smile was approving. "Good. We start tomorrow at dawn. Hope you like pain, little Omega. Because I don't believe in gentle training. I spent 21 years being emotionally tortured by my own pack," Sheila said. "I think I can handle some physical discomfort." The laughter that rippled through the group felt like acceptance, like belonging, like pack. Teodoro caught her eye across the room, and something warm and intense passed between them. Pride. Recognition. Something deeper that neither of them was quite ready to name. 3 weeks, he said to the group. "We have 3 weeks to build a case, gather allies, and prepare for the fight of our lives. The council thinks they've won. They think eliminating me was the end of their problems." His smile was sharp and dangerous, and for the first time, Sheila saw the full weight of his authority. Not just an alpha, not just a king, a wolf who'd been forged in fire and was ready to burn down everyone who'd wronged him. "They're about to learn," Teodoro said, "that killing a king is easy, but killing what he represents? That's impossible." And as the group began planning strategies forming, alliances being sketched, training schedules being arranged, Sheila felt something she'd never felt before. Purpose. Not just survival, not just getting through another day, but actual purpose, a reason to fight that was bigger than herself. The council had tried to make her a victim. Instead, they'd created a revolutionary, and in 3 weeks, they were going to regret it. Chapter 10. Justice at the Winter Gathering. 3 weeks passed in a blur of training, planning, and alliance building. Shelia's body bore the evidence of Annette's brutal training regimen, bruises layering on bruises, muscles she didn't know she had screaming in protest every morning. But she could fight now, not like an alpha warrior, but like someone who refused to go down easy, someone who'd make her enemies pay for every inch they took. More importantly, she'd learned to use her omega status as a weapon. While alphas relied on brute force and dominance, Shelia had learned to be unpredictable, to seem weak, and then strike from unexpected angles, to use an opponent's assumptions against them. You're never going to overpower an alpha in direct combat, Annette had told her during one particularly brutal sparring session. So stop trying, be water. Flow around their strength, find the gaps in their defense, and exploit them ruthlessly. Now, standing at the entrance to the winter gathering grounds, Shelia felt that training settle into her bones. She wore simple clothes, dark pants, a fitted jacket, and Teodoro's pendant visible against her chest, a statement of protection and defiance. Behind her, Teodoro and his 5 companions were dressed formally, bearing the symbols of their destroyed pack with pride. Beside her, Joni stood tall in clothes that bore no pack insignia, a rogue by choice, loyal to sister over tradition. And surrounding them, spread throughout the gathered crowd, were the allies they'd spent 3 weeks cultivating. 23 wolves from 7 different packs who'd been hurt by council policies, who'd lost territory, resources, or family members to the council's consolidation of power, who were ready to stand witness when the time came. The council is watching, Teodoro murmured, his hand finding Shelia's. I can feel their eyes on us. Good, Shelia said. Let them watch. Let them see we're not afraid. The winter gathering was held in a massive natural amphitheater carved into the mountainside. Hundreds of wolves had already gathered representatives from 42 packs, all dressed in their formal regalia, all buzzing with rumors about the Alpha King's miraculous survival. At the center of the amphitheater, on an elevated platform, sat the 6 council members. Shelia studied them carefully, matching faces to the names she'd memorized. Alpha Philip of Ironwood, 60 years old, silver-haired, wearing his authority like armor. Alpha Chang of Riverside, younger, charismatic, with a politician's smile that never reached his eyes. Alpha Guy of Shadow Peak, brutal and direct, rumored to have killed his own father to claim his position. Alpha Tom of Clearwater, scholarly and cold, the strategic mind behind most council policies. Alpha Francisco of High Ridge, quiet and watchful, difficult to read. Alpha Ted of Stonecrest, the youngest council member, ambitious and ruthless. 6 alphas who'd thought they'd eliminated their biggest threat. 6 alphas about to learn they'd made a catastrophic mistake. Brothers and sisters of the Northern Territories. Alpha Philip's voice boomed across the amphitheater, calling the gathering to order. We come together as we have for generations, to discuss matters affecting all packs, to settle disputes, to honor our traditions. The formal opening continued acknowledgments of territory, recognition of visiting dignitaries, the ritual declarations of peace and hospitality that made the gathering sacred ground. Then Alpha Philip's eyes found Teodoro, and his expression hardened almost imperceptibly. We must also acknowledge a tragedy, Philip continued, his voice heavy with false grief. 3 weeks ago, the royal pack was attacked by hunters. 43 wolves slaughtered in a coordinated assault. We mourned the loss of our Alpha King, Teodoro Wagner, believing him dead along with his pack. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Everyone had heard the rumors, but this was the first official acknowledgement. However, Philip's voice sharpened. It seems reports of the Alpha King's death were premature. Very premature, Teodoro called out, his voice cutting through the amphitheater like a blade. He stepped forward, and the crowd parted instinctively. Since I'm standing right here, the murmurs exploded into shocked conversations. Wolves craning to see, packs whispering urgently to each other. The 6 council members exchanging glances that Shelia read easily. Panic disguised as surprise. Alpha King, Philip said, recovering quickly. We're overjoyed to see you alive. Please come forward. Tell us how you survived such a devastating attack. It was a trap, Shelia realized. They wanted Teodoro to speak first, to control the narrative, to frame his survival as luck rather than evidence of conspiracy. She squeezed Teodoro's hand, a silent message. He glanced at her, understanding, and nodded slightly. I survived, Teodoro said, moving to the center of the amphitheater. Because an Omega refused to let me die in a blizzard, because 5 members of my pack fought through impossible odds to stay alive. Because we ran. And we hid. And we prepared for this moment. He pulled out the documents Joni had stolen, holding them high. I survived to bring evidence of treason, of corruption, of a conspiracy that reaches to the highest levels of our governance. The amphitheater went deathly silent. Those are serious accusations, Alpha King, Alpha Chang said smoothly. Perhaps grief and trauma have. Grief didn't forge these financial records, Teodoro interrupted. Trauma didn't create these communications between council members discussing my elimination. Pain didn't manufacture the tracking device that was planted in one of my wolves to ensure the hunters could find us. He gestured to Mohammed, who stepped forward and pulled aside his shirt, revealing the scar where the device had been surgically removed. Another wolf, a tech specialist from one of their allied packs, held up the actual tracker, its serial number visible. This device, the specialist called out, is military grade, hunter issue. It was implanted during the initial attack and used to track the Alpha King's movements for 3 days. The hunters who attacked weren't acting alone, they were being coordinated by someone with detailed knowledge of the Royal Pack's movements and routines. More murmurs. Louder now. Several Alpha representatives were standing, demanding to see the evidence. These accusations are outrageous, Alpha Guy snarled, his control slipping. You dare accuse the council? I dare accuse traitors who wore the face of leadership while selling out their own people. Teodoro shot back. His Alpha aura exploded outward, reminding everyone exactly why he was king. The sheer power rolling off him made wolves instinctively submit, heads bowing, eyes averting. All except the 6 council members, who held their ground through sheer force of will. And Shelia, who stood tall beside him, her Omega presence somehow grounding his power rather than being crushed by it. Show them, Teodoro said quietly. Annette and Daniel moved through the crowd, distributing copies of the evidence to pack representatives, financial records showing embezzlement, communications detailing the planned attack, testimony from the tech specialist about the tracker, witness statements from survivors of the massacre, and then the piece de resistance. Joni stepped forward. My name is Joni Rose, formerly of Nightshade Pack, she announced, her voice carrying despite her nervousness. I was the daughter of a beta, destined for leadership. I gave that up because I couldn't stand by while my pack collaborated with the council's corruption. She pulled out Elder Underwood's documents, the ones she'd stolen before leaving. These files prove that Nightshade Pack's elder was taking payments from the council in exchange for information, including detailed reports about an Omega named Shelia Stanton, who had been mapping territories and establishing supply caches throughout the region. The council wanted to know if she was an asset or a threat. When she saved the Alpha King's life, they decided she was a threat that needed to be eliminated. All eyes turned to Shelia. This was the moment she'd been dreading. Standing in front of hundreds of wolves, being seen in a way she'd spent her whole life trying to avoid. But she thought about everything that had brought her here. The years of invisibility, the abuse and dismissal. The night she'd saved 20 wolves from a blizzard without expecting anything in return. The moment she'd chosen to jump off a cliff rather than be captured. She'd spent her whole life being afraid. She was done with that. Shelia stepped forward, moving to stand beside Teodoro. His hand found hers immediately, and she drew strength from the contact. My name is Shelia Stanton, she said, and her voice was steady. I am an Omega. According to every rule and tradition, I should be invisible, insignificant. But I saved the Alpha King's life. I survived 3 days alone in the wilderness, while being hunted by professionals, and I helped expose a conspiracy that threatens every wolf in these territories. She looked directly at the council members. You tried to eliminate me because I was a witness. Because I proved that Omegas aren't disposable. Because I didn't fit your narrative about who deserves power and voice. Her smile was sharp. You should have tried harder. The amphitheater erupted. Pack representatives shouting questions. Alphas demanding answers from the council. Wolves who'd been hurt by council policies standing and adding their own testimonies to the growing pile of evidence. The 6 council members were surrounded by fury and accusation, their careful facade crumbling. This is a conspiracy. Alpha Philip roared, trying to regain control. A carefully orchestrated attack on legitimate governance by a disgraced king and his Omega accomplice. Then you won't mind submitting to a formal inquiry, came a new voice from the back of the amphitheater. Everyone turned. An old wolf stood there, ancient and powerful, bearing the marks of the Greater Territories Alliance. Behind him were 12 more Alliance representatives, all wearing expressions of grim determination. The Alliance has been monitoring Northern Territories politics for some time, the old wolf continued, moving through the crowd with slow dignity. Concerned about reports of consolidation and corruption, when we received word that the Alpha King was bringing evidence to the winter gathering, we decided to attend personally. He stopped before the council platform, looking up at the 6 alphas with eyes that had seen centuries of wolf politics. You will submit to a formal investigation. You will answer these charges. You will open your records to Alliance auditors. And if any of you are found guilty of treason, genocide, or corruption, his voice went cold, you will be stripped of your positions and exiled from wolf society permanently. Alpha Philip's face went ashen. We have rights. You have responsibilities, the old wolf interrupted. Responsibilities you've betrayed. The investigation begins immediately. He turned to Teodoro. Alpha King, on behalf of the Greater Territories Alliance, I apologize for not acting sooner. Your evidence is compelling. Your testimony will be heard, and justice will be served. The amphitheater erupted again, but this time with cheers. With vindication. With the collective relief of wolves who'd been suffering under corrupt leadership and finally saw a path to change. Shelia felt Teodoro's hand tighten around hers. Felt the tension drain from his body as years of planning and hoping and fighting finally paid off. We did it, she whispered. You did it, Teodoro corrected. None of this happens without you. The evidence I could have gathered myself. But the courage to present it? The alliances we built? The testimony that gave voice to the powerless? He turned to face her fully. That was all you, Shelia. Before she could respond, wolves were surrounding them, pack representatives wanting to shake Teodoro's hand, to pledge support, to offer condolences for his lost pack members. But many of them, more than Shelia expected, were approaching her too, thanking her for giving voice to Omegas, for proving that strength came in many forms, for showing that the lowest-ranked wolf could still change the world. Joni appeared through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. You were magnificent, she said, pulling Shelia into a hug. Absolutely magnificent. So were you, Shelia said. You gave up everything to do the right thing. Not everything. Joni pulled back, smiling through her tears. I gained something more important. My sister. My integrity. My self-respect. The winter gathering continued late into the night, the formal investigation beginning immediately. Council members being escorted to Alliance custody, packs realigning alliances, and discussing the future of Northern Territories governance. Through it all, Shelia and Teodoro remained at the center, answering questions, providing testimony, accepting the gratitude and support of wolves who'd been waiting for someone to stand up to corruption. It was exhausting and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Finally, as dawn approached, they managed to slip away to a quiet corner of the grounds. Just the two of them, watching the sun rise over the mountains that had nearly killed them weeks ago. What happens now? Shelia asked. The council will be investigated, probably exiled. But what about you? What about the Northern Territories? The Alliance will oversee governance until new leadership can be established. Teodoro said. They've asked me to help with the transition, to consider reforming the council system entirely, making it more representative, with checks on power, with protection for all wolves regardless of rank. That's a lot of work. It is, he turned to face her, which is why I'm hoping you'll help me with it. Shelia's breath caught. Me? You. The Omega who exposed corruption, who proved that intelligence and courage matter more than rank, who saved my life, and then saved my legacy. His hands came up to frame her face. Shelia, in 3 weeks, you've completely changed how I think about leadership, about power, about what makes someone worthy of authority. I don't want to rebuild these territories without you. I don't know anything about pack governance. You know everything that matters. You know how it feels to be overlooked, to be dismissed, to have your worth determined by something you can't control. His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. You can make sure we build something better, something where every wolf omega beta alpha has value and voice. That's a lot of responsibility for someone who spent most of her life trying to be invisible. Then it's a good thing you're not trying to be invisible anymore. Teodoro's smile was soft and proud, and filled with something that made Shelia's heart race. You're the most visible wolf in the territories right now. The Omega who changed everything. What you do next will inspire hundreds of others like you to believe they can change things too. The weight of it settled on Shelia's shoulders, not crushing, but grounding. Purpose, legacy, the chance to make sure no Omega ever felt the way she'd felt for 21 years. Okay, she said. I'll help. On one condition. Anything. No more secrets. No more protection bonds without asking permission first. No more making decisions about my life without me. She met his eyes. I'm not a political pawn or a debt to be paid. If we do this, if we rebuild together, we do it as equals. Equals. Teodoro agreed immediately. Partners. In everything. Everything. Shelia's heart was racing now, because she knew what he was implying. What the word everything meant in wolf culture. I fell for you the moment you ordered me to stop intimidating people in that cave, Teodoro said. Fell harder every time you proved you were stronger and braver and smarter than anyone gave you credit for. And I'm asking not as an alpha king, not as someone who needs your help politically, but as a wolf who can't imagine facing tomorrow without you. Will you let me court you properly? Will you give me the chance to prove I see you as more than a rescued debt or a political asset? I'm an Omega, Shelia said, even as hope bloomed in her chest. People will say you're only with me because I saved your life. That it's gratitude, not real feeling. Let them say what they want. Teodoro leaned his forehead against hers. I know the truth. You saved my life, yes. But more than that, you reminded me what kind of leader I wanted to be, what kind of wolf I wanted to be. You made me want to build a world worthy of you. Shelia's breath hitched. No one had ever talked to her like this, like she was precious, valuable, worth building a world for. Yes, she whispered. Yes to courting. Yes to partnership. Yes to everything. Teodoro's smile was brilliant, and when he kissed her gentle and reverent and full of promise, Shelia felt something click into place. Like she'd finally found where she belonged, not in a territory or a pack or a role defined by her designation, but with a wolf who saw her for everything she was and everything she could become. When they finally pulled apart, the sun had fully risen, painting the world in gold and pink. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the gathering, continuing justice being served, systems being rebuilt, change being forged from the ashes of corruption. We have a lot of work ahead of us, Teodoro said. We do, Shelia agreed. Reforming pack governance, establishing protections for Omegas, making sure the council's corruption never happens again, training the next generation to value all wolves equally. She smiled. But we'll do it together. Together, Teodoro echoed. And as they walked back toward the amphitheater, toward responsibility and purpose, and a future they'd build with their own hands, Shelia thought about the Omega she'd been just weeks ago, the invisible girl who'd spent her life being told she was worthless. That girl had saved 15 dying wolves in a snowstorm, had saved the Alpha King's life, had exposed corruption and changed the course of Northern Territory's governance, had jumped off a cliff and survived to tell the tale, had found her voice and refused to be silenced. That girl, that incredible, brave, brilliant girl was still inside Shelia. But now she was surrounded by proof that she'd always been worth something. That her mother and her pack and everyone who dismissed her had been catastrophically wrong. And when morning came, when the Alpha King took her hand and led her into the future they'd build together, Shelia Stanton, Omega of no pack and every pack, stepped into her power, and she never looked back. And so we reach the end of Shelia's journey from invisible Omega to the wolf who changed everything. Here's something to think about. How many people in your own life have you underestimated because of what they appeared to be on the surface? And how many times have you been underestimated? Shelia's story reminds us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice at the end of the day whispering, "I will try again tomorrow." Sometimes it's jumping off a cliff rather than accepting a cage. Sometimes it's choosing to save lives even when your own is in danger. If you found yourself inspired by Shelia's courage, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, Would you have saved the dying wolves in that blizzard, knowing it could cost you everything? Or would you have chosen safety over courage? Until next time, remember you're stronger than anyone ever gave you credit for.